It is the month of March, and it is time for all of the insight on what's going on with the bracket. It's in the name, bloggingthebracket.com. Hello, Chris Dobbertean. We love it. Midweek here,
Hello,
kind of
TJ.
in the preview mode. So much is fluid. I realize from day to day, much less a couple of days, a lot of this is going to change. But for right now, the midweek games, we're very interested in what's happening. Some conference tournaments and smaller conferences are beginning. All the conference tournaments will basically be getting underway by this time next week as they hear us and see us. So great time
Yeah.
of the year. So just as a general comment, how fired up are you for March right now and all of this to unfold?
I think I am probably the most fired up I've been in many years simply because there still seems to be so much left to be decided. And I think that, next week in particular is going to be fascinating when it comes to the bubble.
Fair to say there's probably 5 or 6 teams that can play their way in, and there's probably going to be 4, 5, 6 teams that end up not getting in and or playing their way out, depending on what happens the rest of this week and next week at conference tournaments. Fair?
Yes, the ground underneath these teams near the cut line is not very solid. Let's put it that way.
You take losses, and a bunch of losses happen this weekend. You take losses up around last four in, first four out. It's not a good thing. So let's start at the top. Everybody, as a consensus, I mean, we saw Duke and Arizona reinforce it Monday night. Everybody has
Yeah.
Duke and Arizona and Michigan as number one seeds. Interesting, in my latest blogging the bracket reveal, you have UConn sitting in that fourth number one seed over Florida. This is despite the fact that Chris has allegiance to some extent with the University of Florida, including the fact for the audio audience that's not seeing him, he's actually wearing an orange shirt today. I don't know if it's a
Yeah,
Gator
I'm
shirt.
wearing a national championship shirt today. Yeah.
All of that said, UConn occupies your fourth number one spot. Take me through your rationale on you have Florida just behind him as the first number two seed as number five, but why UConn there in that slot right now for you?
The biggest thing is the head-to-head result. The fact that they have played UConn, won a neutral floor. Going back to what Keith Gill said in the bracket preview, why Iowa State was ahead of Houston. That head-to-head, they seem to really rely on that head-to-head this year. Otherwise, it's kind of interesting. The two teams are very, very close. Florida is a little bit ahead when it comes to the predictive metrics. Your Ken Palm, your Torvik, your T rank. Looking ahead, they're very much ahead of UConn. Pretty solidly. UConn has the advantage though on the results-based metrics because they played, a pretty good non-conference schedule and were able to win games that Florida was not able to win. So the thing I think Florida has to keep an eye on is they have to keep winning. They also have to hope UConn probably loses at some point, which you never know, with the Big East tournament, how that's
Right.
going to go. That's probably their best opportunity to get there. But when you look at the metrics and you average out, the result-based metrics and the predictive metrics together, Florida grades out as the final number one seed on numbers. But when you actually go and dig into the, games and all that stuff, that's where UConn has a slight advantage still. And I really think that Florida losing those three big games in non-conference are really what's keeping them back right now.
Interesting, though, that in quad one, they have 11 wins at the moment, and the Mississippi State game obviously is irrelevant, not a quad one
Yeah.
game. UConn has 8 quad one wins
Yeah.
at the moment. So while we're going back and forth on metrics and numbers, we'll see how much that matters. Um, Stay
One
tuned.
thing though I want to
Yeah,
point out
do
though
it.
is that remember you have that quad 1A group that's the top, the absolute cream of the crop games that you're playing. UConn in that metric is 5-2. Florida is 3-3.
There's a big difference
So
at the top,
that's a
very
big
top.
difference there. Yeah,
All
at
right.
the very top,
All
yes.
right, well done. This is why we have the man here. So on that two line right now, give me your number twos midweek here besides Florida, and then I want to follow up about who could maybe get into that second seed line as the next 10, 11 days unfolds. But right now, your other number twos.
Michigan State has made a big jump after winning at Purdue and winning at Indiana. They're now the second two seed. Houston and then Illinois. And if you're looking at teams that, might be able to make that jump, I actually have Texas Tech as the top three seed right now. And you would think, well, they don't have JT Toppin, that's, How are they going to perform? That's why the committee dinged them in the preview, knocked them from a 3 to a 4. They're still playing really well. I mean, they've won at Iowa State, who was behind them now. And really, I think that, those two are probably in the best position. Purdue, has kind of hit the skids a little bit. They have a game against Northwestern that they absolutely cannot lose coming up. And Nebraska's kind of the other team there. But everybody else is like in the 4 line. Gonzaga, lost to St. Mary's. Alabama, I think, is making a late push, but I don't think it's going to be enough. They have too many losses. And then Kansas and Virginia round out the top 16. And I don't think at this point, especially after the Cavaliers got absolutely torched by Duke, that those teams have any shot of moving up to the 2 line.
Love the insight of Chris Dobbertean. If you're seeing us on the YouTube video, know that this is also a pod, the College Basketball Coast to Coast podcast on Apple, Spreaker, Spotify. It's also on the Tunein College Basketball Coast to Coast channel streaming. Those are audio only, so if you're only hearing the voice, come find the video on YouTube and see what these two male models, Chris and me, look like on YouTube on the College Basketball Coast to Coast YouTube channel. Back to Alabama, huge win for them with Tennessee. They're the presumptive second seed in the SEC tournament. Interesting on how much mileage could you get out if you are in Alabama, a Tennessee, and Arkansas, and you win the tournament. This is a big hypothetical. And you've gotten two, let's say, huge wins on the neutral floor in Nashville. How much can that push you to a 3 seed, maybe not a 2 seed, if you're in that group in the SEC of Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, somebody like that?
I think the hardest thing is the fact that, that final being on Sunday afternoon as the committee is kind of wrapping up. I think that's kind of the biggest obstacle to a team like Alabama or Tennessee or Arkansas moving up. But I think it's very possible if they can actually, get to Sunday, get a couple wins, win a quarterfinal, win a semifinal on Saturday, they'll be in great position probably to get there. And of course, it's all going to depend on what happens in the Big 12 and the ACC, especially in the Big 10 and the Big 12, because those are really their biggest rivals, for a number 3 seed, reside right now.
Yeah, and the same can be said for somebody like Texas Tech. You mentioned Michigan State. Pick one. Illinois that could really help themselves. Yeah. You pick up 1 or 2 huge wins on a neutral floor in Chicago or in Kansas City. It should be a big deal to that committee. I mean, just as a sidebar, you and I have been doing this for a long time. When those committees are openly saying that these championship games don't matter, what are we doing? What are we doing? You can't with a straight face tell me that a game on a neutral floor in November matters, but a game on March the 14th or March the 15th on a neutral floor can't be under consideration for the outcome.
Yeah,
we're not, my line, you love my lines. We are not doing this on a yellow legal pad with a pen anymore. There are computers, there are easy ways to get to this. So I just
contingency brackets. They do contingency brackets for a reason, and they even did one. They said they did one for the preview special. So I don't understand why this is always such a topic of debate. It should not be a debate at this point. If the whole season matters, Selection Sunday games matter.
Absolutely, on a neutral floor, and especially for a team like we're saying, like Michigan State or Tennessee, if they're getting to play an SEC championship game and win it, that should matter. All right, we're off our public service announcement on that. Let's do a little last 4 in, first 4 out. In the latest reveal that you have, it's interesting because, again, almost several teams did take a loss late in the year. So here late in their regular season, that kind of has jumbled some of this up. Your last 4 in at the moment is Santa Clara, TCU, New Mexico, San Diego State. A lot of Western flavor on your last 4 in. Expound a little more on your last 4 in.
And this kind of goes into the first 4 out too, because I think there's going to be a real debate here. Santa Clara, New Mexico, and San Diego State in particular don't have the quality wins that even a TCU has in that group. And you kind of look at it and you look at the 2 teams that are the first 2 out, Auburn and Indiana. And Auburn, I think, is going to be an absolutely fascinating case. I think if Auburn ends up finishing the regular season, right now they're 15-14, if they, sweep this week, they'll be 17-14. And that, The SEC, the committee loves taking an SEC team that's, in that 16-14, 17-14 kind of range. And they're probably going to end up losing. So they'll probably end up being 17-15 or 18-15 when all is said and done. And right now, they have 6 quad one wins. And that really is kind of the difference here, that why they really have not kind of fallen off the board. 5, excuse me. They're 5-11 against quad one, which again, a couple factors here. You're not getting all those quad one wins in the SEC like you did before. So that's a function of their non-conference schedule. And that's, again, something the committee absolutely loves. But on the same token, it's like they've lost 14 times. They have not looked particularly good. Their 2 best wins came on road and neutral floors. But you look at their overall road and neutral record, and they're 5-10. So, this is a squad that I think is really, the metrics, again, average the metrics out, they come out to be about a 10 seed. So, but at the same time, you take teams that are under 500 or at 500 and do the same thing, you can come up with the same, the
same
math
rationale.
The math would still math. The math would still math. They have to win. They have to win.
Do you come down where I do, that once you've lost the 13th, the 14th, the 15th game, I don't care how tough your conference is, to me, that's too many times that you've had to prove yourself at the end of the year.
Yeah.
They blew a game at home to Ole Miss. They blew a game late in the year at Oklahoma. That is supposed to matter, right?
Exactly. Yes. And again, I really wish that they would go back to having some kind of formal, performance in your last 10 games metric that they used to have ages ago. Because even though we recognize the entire season matters, but you have to think about what a team is doing as they head into the tournament. If a team can get better and improve their stock like Florida has by, getting better as the season goes on, you should be punished by getting worse. And that's, I think, the thing that really is kind of the disconnect here. The metrics really like Auburn, but the on-court performance is just simply not there for me right now.
And by the way, we're not just going to be slamming them in this regard. Iowa State is the same kind of thing. They had a lot of great wins in November and early December, but now they are taking losses in the Big 12. And if they lose another game or two, you've got to get dinged for that. They're not going to get knocked out.
Yeah.
But you've got to get dinged for losing these games. That should matter. All right, so back to the first 4 out going into midweek play. You have Indiana off the Michigan State loss. You have VCU. You have Virginia Tech. Elaborate a little more on your first 4 out.
Indiana's kind of, almost the opposite problem to Auburn, because their metrics, their result-based metrics are terrible. Their predictive metrics are really good because they have been playing better by and large. But, again, it's the same thing. 2-11. 2-11. And, Ohio State is kind of the other team you'd kind of think about here. Being 2-10, but the factor is that Indiana's non-conference schedule and, the way the games align within the Big Ten schedule, because it's unbalanced, they end up playing a far weaker schedule than what Ohio State did. And that's kind of the difference there, even though Ohio State only has 2 quad one wins.
Interesting. Ohio State got the Purdue win on Sunday. So now midweek, Indiana here about to play Minnesota as we do this on Wednesday night. Ohio State to play Penn State on Wednesday night. Those games
on the road.
On the road. Those games don't really help them. But oh, by the way, this weekend, Indiana and Ohio State play each other, Chris.
Yeah.
So that's one more data point at large, right?
And then the other thing you have to consider with Ohio State is they're playing a Penn State team that just beat Iowa in State College. So, this is not going to be an easy trip for them necessarily. And I think that's really why I say that, the ground is kind of, shuffling under all these teams' feet. This is why you still have very difficult games to go in the final week. And, you might leave yourself with too much work to do heading to Chicago, if you're a Big Ten bubble team.
And again, VCU and Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech had an opportunity at North Carolina, even without Taylor Wilson, and didn't get it. So they have a couple of good wins.
Yeah, and VCU's another one of those teams that, is kind of, the metrics, I think, kind of really drive it more than the results because, They're right now 5-7 against quad 1 and 2. They don't have any bad losses, no quad 3 or quad 4 losses. And their best wins, South Florida and Virginia Tech, which kind of give them, a little bit of an edge over, two teams that are probably going to be, if the Bulls don't win the American, they're probably going to be looked at as an at-large. Virginia Tech's already there. So that's, kind of one team that you want to keep an eye on that, those 2 wins have gotten a little bit better. And Virginia Tech, of course, has wins over Virginia and Clemson. But again, 2-9 against quad 1. So they're a little bit better than Ohio State. But their predictive metrics do not look good, do not help their case. And they also haven't played well away from home. And that's another big factor that's kind of working against the Hokies.
And on VCU, they are playing midweek with George Mason on Tuesday night. You probably already know that result. If you're listening to us, obviously on Wednesday, you do know that result.
A team they lost to already on the road.
Stay tuned. Dayton at Richmond on Tuesday night. So those results matter for the resume. And then Dayton and VCU play each other. The A-10 always seems to do this the last weekend of the season, have these two playing each other. That game could be very significant for an at-large case for both of them, right? VCU and Dayton.
Dayton is kind of hanging off the radar right now, but their net's at 71. So they're kind of in that range where, if they end up sweeping this week, they're going to be back in the picture. They're probably going to be, I would say, they'll be in the top 70 with 2 wins. I won't say for sure they'll be in the top 60, but they're going to definitely be in position to actually get a look. But they have to win those 2 games this week.
All right. Stay tuned on those. Anything else? Any other compelling team midweek matchup? Did I leave anything else out, Chris? Or are we good as we really head into the final week of regular season play in the power leagues and conference tournaments getting underway all over the place? Anything else to touch on?
We have a couple of interesting games in the MAC tonight because Miami, still trying to stay perfect. They host Toledo. Akron, who's in second place, a game back. They're at Central Michigan. Akron is still kind of in the range, in that large range too, just because of their metrics. And this is something that you'll notice on a lot of these teams outside, let's say, the top 10 conferences. You look at Belmont, you look at Miami, you look at an Akron, you look at their profile, and you see that they're just not any quad 1 or even quad 2 opportunities.
Well, right.
And that's because they've pretty much been shut out. And I know that, fans of Miami and Belmont in particular have been, talking about how they just didn't get opportunities to play those kind of games. They tried to schedule anybody and nobody would play them.
But I'm one of those, while we're here, I'm one of those who doesn't believe nobody would play them because I find it fascinating that Akron was able to get, I'm double checking here. I think Akron got Purdue to play them, got them to pick up the phone, and Akron was the preseason favorite in the MAC. They got them to play them. I believe VCU got NC State to play them and pick up the phone. Dayton
that was part of the. I think that was an extension of the whole Will Wade.
It might have been, but I mean, like Dayton got Cincinnati and Marquette to pick up the phone. Herb Sendek and Santa Clara got Xavier to pick up the phone about playing them. New Mexico got Xavier to pick up the phone about playing them. So depends on who you're calling, who you're checking on.
Yeah.
Do you still maintain that if Miami gets to this finish line, they'll be 31-0, and if they get a win? Let's, under my hypothetical, say they get a quarterfinal win in the MAC tournament, that a loss could still knock them out at large if they're, say, 32-1 under my hypothetical. You believe that?
Because remember that they're really only 29-1 because they played 3 non-D1 games, which hurts.
Okay.
It doesn't show up. It doesn't show up in the metrics, but it's there on the sheet, and that's those are opportunities where you couldn't even get.
And I'll interject. I'll tell you what else is on the sheet. They're like 330 in strength of schedule. It's horrific. And that's on the sheet also. When you're talking about who the teams are that they got to the 29 or more wins.
And really their metrics reflect that because yes, they won all those games. That's keeping all their metrics, even though there's a real wide spread between the 3 of them. KPI has them at 48. Their strength record's 21. And their wins above bubble is 32, which is, all are within at large range. But you look forward, and they played so many close games in the MAC, but those numbers are all, barely in the top 90 at this point. And that's, I think, the thing that could very well ding them, if they happen to lose a game early in the MAC tournament.
Well, we saw last year, but last year, the name on the front of the jersey absolutely mattered for North Carolina. 1-12, 1-12 in quad one.
Yeah,
Stop talking to us about who you played and did you beat them when you lost all the important games on your schedule except for one.
yeah,
So the name on the front of the jersey mattered last year. So now here we go with are you gonna knock Miami of Ohio out for not playing anybody? No quad one games. Haven't played a
no,
top 50 team all year long. Or are you gonna keep
no,
them in because there's going to be others screaming, hey, they played no one relative to the strength of
yeah,
everybody else. But let's see. Let's see what they do with the Miami interesting story. And as we keep joking, be your own committee. If you win the automatic bid, all of this
yeah,
is relevant. So all of this isn't relevant.
yeah,
All the arguing about what would they do because you can control it yourself with an auto bid. We'll see.
yeah.
We'll see on them. Anything else? Are we good midweek? Are we ready to throw the ball up some more? We got like Sun Belt tournament, Horizon League tournament here midweek. We got tournaments that are getting underway here midweek.
Yes, we had one game yesterday. I think we have 4 games, 5 games today. So we're there's it's slowly building. Tomorrow we'll have the A Sun in Jacksonville, and that'll be daytime
And the
hoops.
Horizon League on Wednesday gets rolling. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So there's plenty of good hoops to come.
No doubt. Chris Dobbertean, thank you. I always appreciate the insight here on college basketball coast to coast. They need to go to bloggingthebracket.com for the latest. The latest bracket release is out. You're going to be doing this at least every other day, if not daily, coming up here the next few days and heading to championship
Friday,
week, right?
yeah. Friday is the last semi-weekly post, and then once we get to Sunday all the way through will be new
Right.
bracket every day.
Love it. Bloggingthebracket.com. Chris, thank you. And we thank you for being with us as part of college basketball coast to coast.